I think most of you know what absolute values are if I give you a problem, but it's a little hard to define sometimes. Like, uh, kind of. What'd you say, Chris? Yes. Oh, that is perfect. It is the definition of absolute value is the distance a number is away from zero. So when you to designate absolute value, we use those long straight bars. So the absolute value of 3, for example. If you were to look on a number line, how many spaces 0 and 3 are from each other? And then just 3 spaces? Yeah. We might have, but it doesn't hurt to refresh. It's been a whole decade, you know. Tell me how you really feel. All right, absolute value of -3, though, would be? Yeah, it's still 3 because -3 is also 3 units away from 0. So this little part right here can get a little confusing. So what's the answer to this? Absolute value of what is, let's say, 5? What would go in for x to make this true? 5 could go in, or -5, right? There's 2 answers to this. 5 and -5 are both correct answers here. So what we are going to kind of be working on today is if we have an equation and I have an x inside of an absolute value, how do I find the 2 answers that come out? This is pretty easy because you can think about it. What numbers are 5 spaces away from 0? 5 and -5, right? So here my answers would be both. Do you guys know how to write an answer when there's more than one of them? Have we talked about the funny brackets? Oh, okay. Well, if you have more than one answer, or you could even do it with one answer, we just usually don't bother. But if I have more than one answer, 2 answers, 3 answers, 15 answers, it doesn't matter. We can put them in a list using these funny brackets. So you have a funny bracket like that, and then I would just list all my answers. So -5, +5. The order doesn't matter if you're just making a list. If I just say, hey, you know, what are your pets' names? The order that you give them to me doesn't matter. You're just listing them off. So same thing here. When you use these funny brackets, that's an indication that's saying, hey, these are all my answers. There's more than one of them. Here they all are. And I'm kind of going to make a big deal. I mean, I know sometimes, look at this one. This one's nice, and then this one's all sort of kind of messed up. I don't care if yours is messed up, right? But what I do care about is that you can't use a smooth parenthesis. So don't even write this down. If you wrote this is now 100% wrong because that's a spot on the coordinate plane, right? That's a location. If you went to -5, 5, and that's not what you mean up here. That's not what you mean at all. So if you're going to write it like this, which you should, you want to get in the habit of doing it, you have to do some sort of a squiggly bracket. I don't even care if it's a squiggle like this, fine, but it can't be a smooth parenthesis. Does that make sense? Everybody's okay? And you can do that for any time you're solving any equation. You just say your variable is equal to, and then you put it in these funny little squiggle brackets. So even if you do have one answer, you can do that. We just usually don't because we're lazy. And here's a fun little fact. Remember just a few minutes ago we were talking about something that has no solution? Remember? So another way, instead of writing out no solution, you can actually do this too. You can have your brackets and then just put nothing in them. And that means the same thing. So that is the same thing as saying no solution. What fun! Now you know. Actually, I'm glad that came up. What if you were taking the MCAS or something and you saw that as one of the choices and you didn't know what it meant? Now you know. Does anybody know about this symbol while we're talking about it? Yeah, that's another way to say no solution. It's something called the null set. N-U-L-L. So yeah, another way to show there is no answer. So when there is no answer, you don't ever want to leave the line blank, because blank means you don't know. This is an answer. The fact that there is no answer, no solution, is your answer. You get what I'm saying? Anywho, So, this is all sort of a side tangent. But yes, this equation has two answers, 5 and negative 5. Okay. How about this equation? What would the answer be to this one? Or answers? Right, again, it could be positive 1/2 or negative 1/2. So I would write my answer, squiggly bracket, positive 1/2 or negative 1/2. Doesn't matter. Either way. Ooh, there's another way to write if my two answers are the same and they're just positive negative. Do you know about writing it like this? You can write like that. Have you ever seen that before? No. Oh, wow. See? New year, new information. This is another way to write positive and negative of the same number. Will they? Yeah, so if you are just giving both positive and negative, you can write it just like that. Either way is fine, doesn't matter to me. All right, now let me try and stump you here. What's the answer to this? Tell me. Okay, so if there were a negative out here, then your answer would be positive 4 or negative 4. But there's not one, so we're not allowed to just put one in. But you're right, if it was there, it would be positive or negative 4. But it's not. So this is saying, give me someone whose absolute value or distance away from 0 is negative 4. Does that exist? No. So this actually has no solution. You can't take the absolute value of a number and get out a negative. Because remember what you're talking about. You're talking about the distance of something is away from something else. So, like, think about if I ask you how far away do you live from the school, your answer is never negative 2 miles. Right? We don't talk about distance like that. It's always a positive value. Oh, okay. So that's actually a really good thought. Like, if you're talking about like below sea level, or yes. So you're right. Vertically, we might talk about it that way. If we're comparing it to something, so if we're talking about below sea level, you might talk about going down 3 feet or underwater, something like that. Yeah, you're right. But if I said, hey, how far apart are we? You're never going to talk about that in negative terms. So on the number line, we're only going side to side, right? We're not going up and down. So any number that you put on the number line is going to be some positive value away from 0. Does that make sense? What if I took the absolute value of 0?
It'll just be 0.
Right, because it is 0 units away from itself. Okay, so that's an important thing to jot down. The absolute value of 0 really is just 0. And then the absolute value coming out with a negative answer, I guess we should finish this one first. There is no answer to that. So, yep, you can do those empty brackets if you want. You could do the 0 with the slash through it. You could write no solution. If you take an absolute value of something, it will come out to be a positive number. Or 0 if it's 0. Okay. So, does all this make sense so far? Everybody okay? All right. So now let's talk about absolute value equations. So that's kind of what we're going to look at today. How should we do this? Should I give you the steps and then we do some examples at the same time? Let's do this. How about we just try and think of what the answers would be to something like this? Absolute value of something plus 3 gets me 8. Let's see if we can guess and check our way to a right answer. Give me a number. 5. Oh, well, okay. If I plug 5 in, is the absolute value of 5 plus 3 really equal to 8? Yeah, so 5 is a good answer. Are there any other answers? Is there anything else that would make this work? Let's try it. -5. If I plug in -5, -5 in here, what's the absolute value of -5? 5. And 5 plus 3 really is 8. There really are two answers to this, 5 and -5. That's absolutely true. Obviously, there's a better way to find them than just guessing them, which we'll go through. But, yes, the answer to this one is both positive and -5. All right. I'm going to try and stump you on this one. You ready? Let's say I made my equation a little bit different. Let's say I did this. Now I put x and 3 inside that absolute value. Let's see if we can guess answers here. Yeah. Well, so give me an answer you think might be right. 5. Let's try it, right? So if I do 5 plus 3, that's 8. And what's the absolute value of 8? 8. So 5 is a right answer. Let's try -5 like we did with the last one. Let's just see what happens. If I plug in -5. Now, here's a good point. Absolute value bars work exactly like parentheses. So if you're doing order of operations, which you always do, right? You have to do what's inside the parentheses before you do anything else. So same thing with absolute value. You have to figure out, you have to do what's inside those absolute values before you move on. So if I put in a -5 there, I have to do -5 plus, so let's actually write it out. -5 plus 3, and I'm checking, does that equal 8? So I have to do -5 plus 3, which is -2. So now I'm here, -2, does that equal 8? So the absolute value of -2 is 2. 2 does not equal 8. So that means -5 is not another answer to this. It's not -5. There is another answer, but it's not -5. Positive 5 is one of them, but -5 is not the other. Huh. Anybody want to take a guess? Or maybe we'll table this one and come back to it once we see how to do it. My point that I'm trying to drive home here is a lot of times kids with the absolute value, they always think that the answer is just positive and negative, whatever number they get. It is not, because clearly here, like, it's almost the same equation, right? If you look at it, they both have an x and a plus 3 and an 8. But my answers are not the same anymore. Yeah. It's not going to be a decimal.
No, like the absolute. Like, if it's like a negative, like 0.5.
Oh, yeah. So when you're taking absolute value of fractions, yeah, it works the same way.
So in order to get 8, right? We have a positive that we did on the left, right?
Mm-hmm.
So look at that. You know how you normally get a positive and a negative?
I want to take the absolute value of something and get out 8. Right? So let's just cover this up with my finger. My finger could either be 8, right? Or what else could my finger be? Who has an absolute value of 8 besides 8? Negative 8. So whatever is under my finger could also equal negative 8, couldn't it? Right? So I just have to figure out what number goes right there to make that be a negative 8. What would you add 3 to and have it be a negative 8? Yes. Negative 11. Let's try it. Negative 11 plus 3 is negative 8, right? And then what's the absolute value of negative 8? Positive 8. There's my other answer. So my two answers in this case, one of them was positive 5. The other one is negative 11. Okay, now obviously we're not just going to guess them all the time. There are steps. I'm going to give you the steps. They're very straightforward, and if you follow them, it'll be nice and easy. It's when you skip steps or go out of order that everything gets all messed up. So don't do that. All right, you ready? Okay, so let's do, I'm going to start a new page. Why not? To solve absolute value equations. Step 1. The very first thing you want to do is get the absolute value by itself. I'm going to do an example problem at the same time over here so we can kind of see as we go. So let's start off with one like this. How about absolute value of x minus 7 equals 10. Let's say we're going to do something like that. All right, so if I wanted to get the absolute value by itself, what would I have to do first? Yeah, how? So if I want just this by itself, I need to get rid of this. Add 7 to both sides, right? Just like a normal equation. Normally, I want to get the x all by itself. So it's kind of like that, but I'm just trying to get whatever is in the absolute value by itself. So I'd have to get rid of this minus 7, so I'll add 7 to both sides. So now I have the absolute value of x is equal to 17. Sometimes the absolute value will already be by itself, and then step 1 is done, right? But I have to get it all by itself, and then I can move on to step 2. Step 2 now tells me, and this is a part that kids skip all the time, and you can't. They do one of these two things and not both. You have to rewrite the equation twice. And here's how. The first time, exactly as you see it. But with no absolute value bars. Okay, so I'm here. This says, I'm going to rewrite it twice. The first time I'm going to write it exactly as I see it. I'm just not going to write the absolute value bars. So I'm literally just writing x equals 17. I just don't put the bars. The second time, rewrite it, but now make it equal to the opposite of the other side. This will make a lot more sense once we do a couple. Still no bars. Let me give you a second to jot that down and then we'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm back over here. I'm rewriting this exact same equation. I'm not going to write bars, so I'm going to write x equals, but now I want to make it equal to the opposite of 17, which would be negative 17. That's it. In this problem, we're done. Not every problem will be done here, though. There might be more things for you to do. So I'm just going to give you a step 3 for those other times. Solve each equation separately. The two answers are your final answers. I shouldn't say that. The two answers are the, to the original equation. And then there's one last step that people always like to skip over, but you really can't. The last thing, you really do need to check your answers. Because it can happen that you did all your math right, and then you take an answer and you plug it back in, and it doesn't work. Miss Xavier, you would never give us something like that. Yes, I would. Okay, so let's go back to our answers. Oh, excuse me. Let's see if I can get everything. Yep, there we go. So if I look back over here, I have two different answers, positive 17 and negative 17. I want to just pop them back in and see if they really do work. So if I take 17 and I plug it in, what's the absolute value of 17? 17, and 17 minus 7 really is 10. So this is a perfectly fine answer. Let's take negative 17 and plug it in. What is the absolute value of negative 17? It's still 17 minus 7 really is 10. Both of these are good answers, so you could write them in those funny brackets if you want. You can do the plus minus if you so choose. Right? So there's a final answer, and we're happy about it. Okay, let's do another example that's not quite the same as this. Say you had something like absolute value of, how about 4x equals, I don't know, 20. Well, let's follow the steps. Step 1, get the absolute value by itself. It already is, right? I don't have, the absolute value is already by itself. Okay, great. Step 2, I'm going to rewrite the equation twice. First, exactly like I see it, just without the bars. So I'm going to write 4x equals 20. Then I have to rewrite it a second time. And what do I write the second time? Yeah, so I literally write the same exact equation again, but now it's 4x equals negative 20. That's the important part. Now I have these two separate equations. I'm going to solve each one separately. So the first one, I just divide by 4, divide by 4. One of my answers comes out to be 5. Over here, divide by 4, divide by 4. This answer just so happens to come out to be negative 5. Can you guys see it okay? I know it's so bright in here. So now let's just check our answers real quick. If I plug 5 back in, 4 times 5 is 20. Is the absolute value of 20 20? Ah, and it's 2020. Take negative 5, plug it back in. 4 times negative 5 is negative 20. And is the absolute value of negative 20 20? Yes. So both of these are good answers. So I'll pop them in, positive and negative 5. Okay. Do not fall into this false sense of security thinking that all of your answers are just going to be positive and negative some number, because that is not the case. Let's do one where it's not. Say I gave you absolute value of x plus 9 equals, I don't know, 15. Okay, let's follow the steps. Step 1, get the absolute value by itself. So what do I do? Nothing, because it's already by itself. You guys know what I mean when I'm saying by itself, right? Okay, I have an absolute value, but then I don't have like a plus 7. Like if you, like back up here. Right? The absolute value was not by itself. I had this minus 7 hanging on. So I had to add 7 to both sides to get rid of it. So I could have the absolute value all by itself. So here, the absolute value is already all by itself. Okay, so step 1 is done. Step 2, rewrite the equation twice. First time, exactly as you see it, but no absolute value bars. So exactly like I see it, I just don't write those bars. Right? You with me? So now, what do I write this second time? It says second time, rewrite it, but now make it equal to the opposite of the other side. Still no bars. So what do I write? Equals negative 15. Correct. A lot of students will mess up. They start switching the sign in here or something. I don't know. Yeah, don't do that. You don't want to do that. You write it exactly as you see it. It's just this is either going to be positive or this is going to be negative. And now I have two equations. I'm going to solve them separately. So over here I would minus 9. So it looks like one of my answers is 6. Over here I'm going to minus 9. My other answer is not negative 6. What's negative 15 minus 9? Negative 24 is my other answer. Not just positive and negative, the same number. Do not fall into that trap. Let's check both these and make sure that they really do work. Take 6, pop it back in. 6 plus 9 is 15. Is the absolute value 15, 15? It is. Take negative 24. What is negative 24 plus 9? Negative 15. And is its absolute value 15? Yes. So these are both good answers. So I'm going to put them in my funny brackets. Try a tougher one? Okay. How about this? What if we did... I know. Negative 5 times the absolute value of x equals 10. All right, so let's actually go back and dissect this a little bit. I kind of said out loud what's happening here. What is the operation with this negative 5 and the absolute value of x? It's multiplication, right? So we don't always write a multiplication symbol or a dot there. Just like when I write 5 times x, I just write 5x, right? I don't put something in between. So when there's not anything in between there, it's just multiplication. So step 1 says to get the absolute value by itself. So I need to get rid of this. So here's a common mistake. A common mistake is to add 5 to both sides. Should you do that here? No, especially because I just told you it was a mistake. The only time you're going to add 5 to both sides is if you're subtracting 5. I'm not subtracting 5 here, right? I'm multiplying by a negative 5. So to undo multiplying, I divide. So I want to divide both sides by negative 5. Okay? So now on the left-hand side, all I have is the absolute value of x. And on the right, 10 divided by negative 5 is negative 2. Okay. So now, step 1 is now finally done. The absolute value is by itself. So now, I'm going to rewrite the equation 2 times. Once just like I see it, just without the bars. So x equals negative 2. And then the other time, exactly like I see it, no bars, but now I take the opposite of this. So I would write x equals positive 2. Let's check our answers. You ready? Let's take negative 2. What is the absolute value of negative 2? 2. And is negative 5 times 2 10? No. Right. So negative 2 actually doesn't work. Do you see that? Even though we did all our math right, our math is perfect, flawless even. But if you take negative 2 and you plug it back into the original, it doesn't work. So I'm going to have to, that answer's not right. Well, let's try. Let's plug in positive 2. What's the absolute value of positive 2? 2. And negative 5 times 2, is that positive 10?
Wait.
It doesn't work either. So what does that mean? That means this has no solution, right? See how important it is to check it though? I'm telling you, so many of you are not going to check your answers. You're going to write down 2 and negative 2 thinking that you're right, and you're actually totally wrong. Now, I will give you a little tip on how to notice this. If you look right here, this line right here is kind of a giveaway. Remember we were talking about this earlier? If you take the absolute value of a number, it will always come out to be some positive value. So right here, you realize this is impossible. There is no number that has an absolute value of negative 2. No number has an absolute value that's negative. So this is an indication that it's impossible. But you can only say that when you have the absolute value by itself. So if you actually want to add, maybe we can sneak it onto our steps here. After you've done step 1 and you have the absolute value alone, if it's equal to a negative number, there is no answer to it. But you have to have step 1 done first. So I'll add it down here. Helpful hint. After step 1, if the absolute value is alone and equal to a negative, there is no solution. So that doesn't come up all the time, but it definitely comes up enough for you to want to be looking out for it. And another reason when a lot of you you're never going to notice, right? So that's why it's so important to go back and check. Not only might you catch a small mistake if you make one, but you need to make sure that if a number doesn't work, you can't claim that it's an answer. You all right, Anthony?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's try another example. Let's do something like, I know. So say you're looking at this and you're like, oh, I already know that there's no. Well, hold on. If you're thinking that there is no answer to this, because you're like, oh, it's equal to a negative number, there's no solution, you are wrong. Remember what I said. You have to do step one first. You have to get the absolute value by itself. If it's still equal to a negative number, then there's no solution. What would I do to get the absolute value by itself here? My first step should be to add 10 to both sides. Once I add 10 to both sides, you will see that my absolute value is not equal to a negative number at all. It's equal to a positive 6. This does have an answer. In fact, it has two answers. Yes, in this case, right, step one is done. Now I just rewrite each one, just without the absolute value bars, and then again without the bars, but now set equal to the negative. There are my two answers. We should check both of these, but I have a feeling they're going to work. Pop in 6. What's the absolute value of 6? 6, and is 6 minus 10 negative 4?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a good answer. Try it with negative 6. Absolute value of negative 6 is still 6, and 6 minus 10 is still negative 4. They are both good answers. So, Jed, do you need to go to the bathroom?
Yeah,
All right. Yeah. Oh, dear. So, any Hoosers, so we have two good answers here, positive and negative 6. All right? So, I just don't want you taking my helpful hint and using it the wrong way. You have to do step one first. Then you can say, oh, it's equal to a negative, no solution. But many times it won't be equal to a negative, and there is an answer, you just got to find it. How about one or two more tougher ones, and then we'll... Oh, we haven't done any with division. We got to do a division one. What if I gave you something like this? Your steps are the same as always.
Wait.
Yeah, I want to get the absolute value by itself. I have to undo dividing by 5. So I would times both sides by 5 to do that. So now those are gone. On the left, all I have is the absolute value of x, and on the right, I have 15. That wasn't so bad. Now I just rewrite it twice, once just like I see it, and then once I take the opposite. So in this case, I get positive negative 15. Oh, and we should have checked that. Positive 15 absolute value is 15 divided by 5 really is 3. Negative 15, 15 divided by 5, still 3. Let's try one like this. What if we had x plus 3 all over negative 5 equal to negative 2? Something like that. Holy moly. All right. What do you think you do first?
The absolute value.
What do you mean?
Like, what's the difference?
Well, you're going to follow our steps, right? Step 1 is get the absolute value by itself. Yeah, I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 5 because I want to get this by itself. I need to undo dividing by negative 5. So I'll times by negative 5 on both sides. So now on the left, I have absolute value of x plus 3. And on the right, what do I have? 10. So step 1 is now done, and it's equal to a positive number. So that means I'm going to have answers here. So I have to keep going. I don't get to just stop and say no solution. All right. Step 2 now says rewrite the equation exactly as you see it. Just don't write the bars. So x plus 3 equals 10. And then the second time I write it as, that's it. And now I'm just going to solve each one separately. So over here I have to minus 3. So looks like one of my answers is 7. And over here I'm also going to minus 3. However, this answer is negative 13, right? So not just positive and negative, the same number. Some of you are just going to write positive and negative, the same number for all of your answers. And that's not going to be right. Sometimes it's right, but not always. So here I have two very different numbers, 7 and negative 13. Let's plug them in real quick and see if they work. 7 plus 3 is 10. Absolute value of 10 is 10. Is 10 divided by negative 5 negative 2? Yeah, so it's good. Negative 13. Negative 13 plus 3, what's that? Well, it's negative 10, right? And then I'm going to take the absolute value of negative 10. Positive 10 divided by negative 5, negative 2. They are both good answers. So I'll put them in the funny brackets. Okay, does this make sense? So if you follow the steps in order and you actually do them, you'll be fine. Where do kids mess up? They mess up because they don't get the absolute value alone first. And then they also don't rewrite the equation 2 times. They just do it once and just make it plus minus. So those are the 2 biggest mistakes that I see. Don't let you make those mistakes. Any questions? No, we're good?